Hello, and welcome to Library Hall, a very special episode called Five Books That Changed My Life. I'm your host, Cedar Dunn, and I'm so excited to have you here with me to review the five books that changed my life. All right, let's get started. So, the first book that I picked, and by the way, some of these were easy picks and some were it was hard to decide, but I like the number five, and so I went with it. The first book that I picked is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Now, this book by C.S. Lewis is a classic. I'm sure many of you have read it yourselves. And I picked this book because when I was very young, I don't know if it was my mom or my dad read it to me, and it had a really big impact on me. In fact, I had a very vivid dream after I was read this book. And I remember it to this day. And the dream was I was in the scene with the lion when the bad people were taking the lion up the hill. In my dream, it was on a hill. He was strapped down to the stone and they were taking him away. And the dream was so vivid, and I was hiding on the side of the road with my friends Marilee and Paul, and we were watching the scene, and it was the giant lion strapped down, and I think he had been tortured, and it were the animals around him, all kinds of weird looking animals that were enjoying seeing this lion in so much pain. And I picked this book as my childhood book that changed me because I think having that dream and having it be so vivid and remembering it my whole life, it made me realize really early on how powerful story is and how powerful books are and how much I love books and just how amazing it is how your imagination can be just opened up to these possibilities in these stories. Now, the entire book is totally delightful, of course. If you haven't read it or if your children haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a really magical book where these kids find the secret closet and they go into it, and then they're in this enchanted land where there's evil and there's good. And I didn't find out until way later on that it's actually an allegory and with some Christian themes or biblical themes, but I don't think as a child you would know that, obviously, unless an adult explained that to you. And it's just a really beautiful book. And obviously, I found it really powerful. So that is the first book of the five books that changed my life. The next book on the list is The Catcher in the Rye. Now, I know many of you have read this or were assigned to read this in high school. And that's exactly when I read it. I actually haven't read it since, and I think it'd be a good one to reread. And I picked it because I loved this book so much in high school. It really spoke to me. I was going through a period of time where I really felt just so out of place and just so irritated by the adults around me, particularly in school. And I loved the character. I loved New York, the setting. I ended up living in New York in my life because I just loved New York. And there was something really kind of, I don't know, the scene where he went, or I don't remember if it's a dream or he talked about where I think he had a dream and he was trying to save all the children from flying off the cliff or running off the cliff, and how he just couldn't do it. And it just really spoke to me. It spoke to me, teenage Cedar, as, just feeling confused and a little alienated and just feeling like there was just so much phoniness, and that's what he was really talking about. So I really loved this book in high school. I loved it so much that I was in a class, English class, and we were reading it, and I was so upset with the teacher because this is my memory now, grain of salt, of course, but my memory is that there was one correct way to interpret everything in this book. And she had the correct way, and we had to agree with her, or we would get a bad grade, or, we'd be called out. And I was so upset by that because I felt like this book was just talking about how misunderstood kids were. And I don't know. I was so upset by the fact that I felt like in that class we couldn't have a conversation and have differing viewpoints. And maybe my memory is faulty, but that's what I remember. And I was so passionate about this book. And I think that's why it's on the list, because it was one of those books. There were several in high school, but it was the one I really remember just relating to so much, and really loving and feeling like I could see myself in the pages. Now, it'd be interesting to read it again as an adult, which I haven't done, which I plan to do. But that is number 2 on the list. Okay, number 3 on the list is called Take Time for Your Life by Cheryl Richardson. Now, this is a self-help book, and why this book made it to the list is a little bit of a story, but this is called the subtitle is A Personal Coach's 7-Step Program for Creating the Life You Want. And it's a book, it's what you imagine a personal coach's 7-step program for creating the life you want would be. So she talks about putting yourself at the top of the list, getting your priorities straight, looking at what's draining you, investing in your financial health, looking at what's fueling you, building community, and pretty straightforward and laid out in a very straightforward way. So it's a good book. I've read many self-help books since then, and I don't know that I would call this book the best of all the self-help books I have read, but this book belongs on my list because when I was 30 years old, I was going through a divorce, and it was just a really terrible time for me. I was in a really bad space. And I had a friend named Amber, and she gave me this book. And it was such a beautiful gift because honestly, I had not ever read any self-help books at that point in my life. I didn't even really understand the concept that you could look at your life and say, okay, what's not working and what can I improve on? Really on purpose and get my shit together, right? And do it in a way with help from somebody like a coach. And it was just, it was a new concept to me at the time. And I think I had sort of poo-pooed it. I mean, I was aware of the genre, but I think I had kind of poo-pooed the genre in my 20s. And then I really hit a crisis point, and my friend gave me this book, and I read through it, and it was really helpful to me in that moment. It really highlighted for me ways that I was not taking good care of myself, and, ways that I was repeating certain patterns that weren't helping me. So it was part of this really beautiful period of time, right at the beginning of my 30s, where I had gone through a really tough divorce, and I had something of a rebirth where I was able to take my life in a new direction and sort of start over in certain ways. And this book was part of that journey. So that is why it is on the list. The next book on the list is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This is a beautiful book. Many of you know it, I'm sure, and maybe are already big fans. This book is a classic, and I think that it's an excellent book. So why it's on the list for me is when I read this, I was writing more and wanting to explore my creativity more, and that's why I picked up this book. It's about creativity. It's called The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. And there's a lot of great things in here, but the 2 things that I took from this that I still practice to this day are artist dates and morning pages. So artist dates, which I wish I did more of, but I don't do as much, but they are just basically like a date that you have with yourself, where you take yourself and you do something that's just interesting for you, that piques your curiosity. Maybe you drive somewhere that you've wanted to check out, or go to a museum or an art show, or just anything that would be of interest to you, even like a pet store or just something unusual, right? Just to spend time with yourself and get curious about the things around you and see what you might discover right? And so I've done that, and I enjoy that. I enjoy my own company, and I enjoy also going on like little writing retreats when I can, and things like that. But the main thing that I've taken from this book that I highly recommend and that I absolutely love, it has been life-changing for sure, is morning pages. And basically the concept is every morning you write freehand 3 pages of just anything that comes to mind. And oftentimes I'm writing about what happened the day before, or I'm writing about just what I'm working on, or just whatever needs to come out of my brain and get onto the page, so that I can just have a clean slate to move on with the day. And she has a lot of great prompts and things in here. But what's really helpful to me is having that morning time. I actually really love it. It's one of my favorite times of the day, is giving myself that time first thing to open the notepad, get out my pen, and just write. And it really doesn't matter what you write. What I do is I'll put a little star next to a passage if it's something that I want to come back to. Otherwise, it just gets shredded, the whole thing. And so it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be anything. It's just a really wonderful practice to just get thoughts out of your head, get them on the page, and create something of a clean slate for yourself for the day. And I highly recommend it. I recommend getting this book and reading more about it. And she has a lot of really beautiful things in here to help. It's like it's a program that's like, I don't know, 11 weeks long, and she takes you through a lot of different things. But that is one of the major things I took from this book, and that I still practice to this day, that I really appreciate and I think has made a big impact on my life. And the final book in my top 5 books that have changed my life is The Course in Miracles. All right, many people have heard of this, many people have not. I'm going to read a short description of what this is, because I can never describe it very well when people ask me about it. So, A Course in Miracles is a unique spiritual self-study program, a course in mind training, designed to undo the illusion that you are separate in any way from God or your fellow humans. At the level of the mind, we are all united as one. When we learn to live this truth consistently, fear, anger, and guilt give way to a profound sense of inner peace. So I thought that was a really beautiful, concise description of this book. This book is it's a text is the first part of it, and the second part of it is like a workbook with lessons, and it's great. There's a lesson for every day of the year. But basically what I've done is read the text. How I'm doing it right now is 1 year I read the text because it's really thick. Then the next year I'm doing the lessons each day, and then I switch off and on like that. People have talked about how it's difficult to kind of get into the book. It's the language is a little it's kind of dense, and it's also talking in Christian language. But I think if you can get through those two things, if you can keep an open mind, and by Christian language, I mean it's talking about God, and it's using Son of God, like these kinds of phrases. But I think if you can stay open, there's a lot of peace that can be found within this message. It's basically like we are all one, and we come from the same source. And there is a lot of peace that comes from reading this book. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of like talk about what is the ego versus peace. And we all want peace in our lives. We all want to get along with the people around us. We all want to feel a sense of connectedness. And it is a choice in the sense of if you believe in a higher power. And I lived for a long time as an atheist. And then when I was 30 and I was telling you about my divorce I was going through, that's when I started having a journey towards having spirituality back into my life. And eventually I found the Course in Miracles, and I studied a lot of different things. But I do think that it is a choice to have a spiritual practice. And if you do choose it, I think it does make for a better life. It's a less lonely life, and there's a lot of good to be had, and there's a lot of good in practicing how to be at peace within yourself, which creates peace in your world. And I have seen that. I've seen that in my life, where I used to have a lot of conflict and I do not now. And I really attribute a lot of that to my study of A Course in Miracles. So I highly recommend this book. And this is a book that I continue to study. I will link to some videos that might help you if you want to dive in and need a little more instruction, in the description of this video, as well as links to all the other books that I have featured. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this was helpful helpful to you. And maybe there was a book in here that you want to check out yourself. I really love books, and I hope you'll come along this journey with me and watch the library haul and just enjoy looking at books and all the ideas we get to explore within them, all the creativity, all the beautiful writing. I mean, it's so wonderful. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time on the library haul.